Hey everybody, it's Tony White from White and Dad Cobbler Company. Today's video is about soul guards, or also known as soul protectors. So we get a lot of questions about, should I do soul guards? Should I do them now? Should I do them later? Different things like that. Am I gonna like them? What do they do? I'm going to try to cover all of that for you and some of the different types of soul guards that are available to you throughout this video. I hope you enjoy. All right, so for today's project, we've got a gorgeous pair of shell Cordovan Allen Edmonds here. They came with JR soles, but the customer's really rough on the soles, really rough on the toes, and he needs a little grip for the type of wear he plans on using this boot for. So we're going to put a set of soul guards on, and I'm going to try to cover different methods of installing soul guards because there's no only one right way to do it. So what this customer wanted was the Vibram Mini Lug soul guard. Now with the Vibram Mini Lug, it's kind of a thick soul guard compared to your dressier soul guards. You can see it's quite a bit thicker. It's around about 4 or 5 millimeter, whereas this is around about 1.8 to 2 millimeter. So one of the things that you have to be careful about when you're getting ready to put your soul guard on is we're not doing heels on this pair, and the customer wanted to know, would that be okay? Would it throw the balance of the shoe off if we didn't do heels, because he likes these heels and likes the look. So let's see how you balance out the shoe is one of our first things, okay? So one of the things that you see us do in some of our other videos when we're balancing out for the boot builds and the shoe builds that we do, we'll set the shoe or boot up here on top of this machine so we can see about heel spring. So when you're pivoting right here and you see how this boot has a spring right there, that's what's called heel spring. Toe spring is the way that the toe turns up in the air. Heel spring is whether it has a pivot point right here or if it sits like that and then this is sitting on the ground. So if you don't have heel spring already in the boot like this, you've got to be careful putting a soul guard on, because you could end up letting the boot drop too low, and now the heel is going to strike funny and the toe spring goes way up in the air. So you don't want to alter the toe spring too much, and you don't want to alter the heel spring too much, especially if one doesn't have it. So like this right here is a thick rubber sole. So if we were to put that under there, see how that jacks that toe way up there? Now obviously once this is installed it would curve up to it, but you can see how that jacks that toe way up in the air and the heel is dropped down. So it'd be like the person who's wearing this boot would feel like they're walking uphill all day long. That would be extremely rough on the calf muscles and the rest of the body. So this would obviously be too thick, but this customer wanted to keep the original heel, and he was curious if it would be able to be done. So once they got here, I slid this up underneath. This drops into place. You've still got a little bit of heel spring left, and it doesn't raise the toe spring too much. So we can do this without having to replace the heels. Now, on a dress type soul guard, you can just about always, not always, but just about always, do a dress soul guard on a dress shoe and not alter the balance without replacing the heels if it's a new pair. You don't have to worry about that. But when you start putting these thicker things on, you want to definitely make sure that you're keeping your balance right. So before we dive into the boots and get focused on the work, I wanted to show you guys that there is a plethora of options available in the soul guard world, and I don't even have everything out here that's available. This is just the most popular that we sell, and so I wanted to go over kind of some of those. These sheets right here are brown and blue and caramel, and it also comes in the same red as the Crespino. I just don't happen to have a pair out here. And then we have the Casale mirror sole guards. Those are for like a lot of the Louboutins and things like that. It comes in the nude and in the red for the Louboutins. Some people call them Louis Vuittons. I don't really know how they pronounce it, but anyway, so you can see you've got the mirror options, and this is one of our really popular ones, is the Explosion sole guard. I really like that tread pattern, and it grips well. It looks cool on a lot of dress shoes. And then we've got the Mini Lug, also by Vibram. And then this one's one of my favorites, which is the Raptor, which has a matching heel as well. The Raptor has a really cool tread pattern. It grips in different directions. It's also rated for snow and ice. And there is another company that makes a sheet and some pre-cuts that look similar to it. I don't know of their compound. I'm not familiar with that company as to whether it has the same properties as far as the snow and ice. It just has the same tread pattern as far as I know. But these are our most popular ones, and what we're going to be doing on these boots today is the Vibram Mini Lug. That's what the customer asked for. So let's get started on this. So one of the first things I like to do, as you can see, this has not been roughed up, and the edge can sometimes be jagged just from where the mold has little squish outs and things like that. So I like to go ahead and rough up my sole guards before I ever get started, so that I can make sure I get a good clean edge. Because like some products like these Fig, you can see they come completely joined together, so you got to cut them with scissors and clean off the fuzzies around them if you want a really good clean job. So first thing we're going to do is rough these up, get these edges cleaned up, and then we'll come back and talk about how you place the sole guard to get a good look and not get it looking crooked on the shoe. Now one of the things I like to do is I like to place my sole guard in a couple of different manners. One is, how is the tread pattern gonna lay out well on the shoe? Two, especially on a dress shoe, can I end up in the middle of a logo or something like that and that just isn't gonna look good? Can I avoid that? If I can, I always do. I'll bring it forward and save the logo that's under there. I always try to center my tread pattern in the center of the shoe here, especially when I have a logo on the sole guard. But you got to be careful, because if you get this cocked this way, see, it's further from the heel in the lateral side than it is the medial side, and it makes the shoe look like it's twisted when you have the tread pattern on there. So this one's not going to be friendly to us on this particular pattern. We're going to have to bring this down and get it lined up. Now the other thing I want to do is make sure that I don't have a lot more tread hanging off this side than I do that side. So I want to get my tread in the center. Now see, I've tilted this, but now the Vibram logo is not centered. So you want to try to get it centered if at all possible. Sometimes it will not allow you to completely center that and get your tread just right. This one is feeling really close right here, matching the curve coming around here. That feels really close. It's a little closer on this edge than it is this, but if I bring it over, then I'm getting the logo here off center, and I'm getting this, so I'm not happy with that. So I've got to really work to get this one lined up like I want it. Okay, so right there is where we're going to end up putting this. Now there's different ways to mark. You can see this is real flimsy because of the design of it, whereas something like the Explosion It's more rigid right here. So it's easier on this to just trace or score that line than it is on this one and get a straight line. So if I'm gonna score with my knife, I get everything lined up the way I want it. And then I pinch this down real good. And I use the back side of the point of my knife that's not going to work. So this logo is giving me a fit because I dropped down into the edge of that, and so I'm not going to get a good score that way. So what I like to do in these cases is place me a piece of tape across here. Now I can lay this back up there. I'm going to get me a good line like that. And then I take my knife and I cut along my line, cut my tape and remove it like that. You can see I'm trying to score not too terribly deep because that one is a very thin bottom edge and I don't want it to be countersunk. And so I get that. Now I want to come down. If you notice, I'm being very careful about hitting the stitches. And now when I do my sandpaper, I can just sand from here up and not destroy my line down here. So another thing I like to do is I like to measure from the edge of the heel to my line. So on this side, on the lateral side, it's 1 3/4. So I want to try to get me a 1 3/4 vicinity. It may or may not work on each shoe because shoes are not made symmetrical even though people want them to be. So I just make me a little score right there. And then I also measure the medial side, which is 1 7/8. So I just make me a little indentation right there. And then I lay my next sole guard down. And as you see right here, it will not. I have a lot of toe hanging off the end. So I'm not going to be able to get an exact measurement. So I've got to work with the boot because when they trim the welts on these, they trimmed them differently than they did on the other one. Okay, so on this one, see, I was able to score it without putting the tape on. Now I come back and retrace my score line. And this is what it looks like when you're carving this out without the tape blocking your view as a viewer. You saw how that just popped loose. That's when you know you've gotten to your line. Now I like a little bit wider spot from my line for my sander so I can be careful and not hit it. So I'm going to come back up here and clean off a little bit more of the slick stuff so I can get a good bond. Now I personally like to put a layer of tape right on that line. That's for cement purposes. You'll see how that works out in a minute. So now it's time to rough the rest of these soles up so we can stick that sole guard. Now, when I do sole guards, I like for them to bond very well, because the way we're doing these, we're not stitching them on, so we don't have any stitching that is going to be holding this in place. So I want that bond to be really well, so I use Renia CDC cement. There's some other brands out there that work just as well. This is the one of our choice. Now, as I'm putting the cement on, you can see by looking at the stitches, all the stitches are intact. I was very gentle around the stitch area not to hit my stitches. And yes, I bumped a couple of them and made them slightly fuzzy because they were too close to the surface where the channel was. But that actually works in your favor instead of against you, because I didn't break the stitch, and it gives little fuzzies that'll hold to the cement and help. Now, as you notice, I just put the cement on here real liberally in the blend area, so I don't have to worry about that peeling loose. And while it's still wet, I peel my tape right off and I have a nice clean line. So for you cobblers out there that are trying to figure out how not to get cement on the bottom, that's how I do it. But still get a good bond in here instead of trying to trace it out and end up leaving thin spots. Now, we use heat boxes and heat our cement for 1 minute, and then you can cool it for 4 minutes and it's ready to stick, instead of having to wait for 30 to 45 minutes for it to be ready to bond. When we originally started using heat, there was a study done on it, and they said it made it bond stronger too. I don't know if it does that, but I do know that it bonds faster, and we've not had any problems by using the heat. So one of the subjects I said we would cover is when to use sole guards and when not to. I personally have sole guards on dress shoes that I know I'm going to wear in foul weather, or I ride a motorcycle, and sometimes I want to be dressed up when I'm riding the motorcycle, so I want a good grip when I put my foot down on that 500-pound machine to not slip at a traffic light. So that's why I like sole guards. We have a lot of customers who like sole guards primarily for foul weather and grip coming in out of the foul weather in the office. Sole guards, when they originally came out, leather wasn't as good as it is today, and so a thin layer of leather, like a thin layer of rubber like this, would last as long as a thick layer of leather like that. So people would get sole guards so that they could get the same amount of durability out of this thin rubber as they did this thick leather, but then they didn't have to go through the expense of replacing the full sole on the shoe. They could just have the sole guards peeled off, put back on, peeled off, put new ones on, peeled off, and put new ones on. And so they could get them redone. I've got a pair of boots. I've put sole guards on them 7 times and I've still got the factory sole on them. So that really helps in that area. So that does a couple of things. One, it saves the stress on the shoe or boot as it gets resoled each time, because when we're peeling that sole guard off, we're pulling against this hard leather and not against the softer leather where the breakdown comes down. So it can allow your shoe or boot to last a lot longer. That's one of the points of sole guards. And then the others is the grip and the foul weather to keep the water from saturating. Sole guards originally became extremely popular on Italian loafers because they had such a thin leather sole and they don't have a Goodyear welt. so the water would just get directly to the foot. You could walk across a parking lot on a light rainy day and your feet would be soaking wet. So a lot of Italian loafer wearers liked it because the thin rubber is really flexible. You can see I can just twist that and roll it up and stuff like that. It doesn't make the shoe more rigid, which is what the Italian leather loafer wearers liked about the Italian loafers, is their flexibility, and it gave you durability. Whereas a thick rubber sole, I cannot bend it very well with one hand. To get it to bend, I've got to use two hands, and it's even very stiff at that, and so that would change the whole dynamics of the flexibility of the shoe or boot. And so that's what people liked about that, was they could put it on their leather for the flexible leather and not lose the flexibility. So those are some of the properties of sole guards. This glue's about dry, and now we can stick them and finish them up. Okay, so to stick the blend, I want to be careful not to overlap and get a curl up, or to leave it back here and have a gap. And then I also want to make sure I get my tread pattern stuck where I laid it out originally. So I lay this down right along that line, press that in real good, and then lay my sole guard down. Press down the middle with my hands, and then I began hammering. Since this is a bond only, I want to get in between the cracks and everywhere, so that's why you saw me flip my hammer over. Now I'm going to welt press this and let it sit overnight so that I get a really good bond. Before I cut it out. So another subject that people ask about when they're getting their sole guards is, should I have them stitched down? Because they've seen where, like Allen Edmonds stitches their sole protectors down from the factory, and then they've seen us and other cobblers where we've stitched it down. I've stitched them down when customers request it, and I discuss it with them. When you stitch your sole guard down, the stitches from the original stitching has to be removed from your welt and from your sole, and then we put new stitching in where that stitching is. You run a risk of lining up the original holes, which is not huge because you've got a lot of original holes and a lot of hard leather to help guide our machine. It just costs more to be able to do that, but it does look really cool because, you know, you can do, a lot of times when we're doing the stitching, it's because the person wants to have like a red stitch showing or something like that. So it's just a matter of a higher expense for doing a sole guard, and makes it a little bit more like a resole. It doesn't hurt anything. It just gives you the look that you want, and we believe firmly in customization and doing it the way the customer wants it done. In this case, the customer just wanted to have it glued on so he can swap them out from time to time. All right, so now we've got these stuck, and it is time to just let them sit overnight, get the green time out, because as I've mentioned in other videos, anytime I'm doing a glue only type sole, I like to let it sit overnight, let the green time get out of the glue, so when we cut and tug on it or sand on it, it warms up the rubber. You don't want anything to make that glue want to let loose and delaminate on the customer. So that's what we like to do. So that's what we're going to do, and we'll be back tomorrow to finish these up. All right, so we've let our glue sit up overnight and get rid of the green time. We've got a strong bond, so now it's ready to just knock these things out. All right, so here we have it, the finished product. And as you can see, it's not a perfectly symmetrical fit because of the way the shoe was shaped. It was very difficult to get it dead center, but it's really close. I'm very happy with how this one came out with what I was dealing with the tread pattern and everything. And for those of you who are wondering what it was that I used to edge these up with, that device is called a poly wheel and a welt brush. And then I used Yankee wax to put that stain on there. And that way, that's complete wax, so it's completely waterproof. It'll last a really long time. You don't have to worry about a little bit of water making it bleed off and everything. But so this is the job. I hope you enjoyed learning about sole guards and the rest of the video, and when and why you should wear sole guards and why you shouldn't and all that stuff. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. See you on the next video.